have a low power Reaper King deck that I know if I put a little bit of focus into, it would be absolutely insane in any type of like 5 to 7 power level table. And it's because when Reaper King hits, you know exactly what your opponent is doing. The minute they reveal that this is what they're playing, you know what the Reaper King player is trying to do, and it's land destruction without saying it's land destruction. And with that juxtaposition, I've kind of built this deck to be on the lower end, to be controlled. Like, yes, it can do crazy things, but it does so relatively slowly. And with that deck building restriction in mind, based on how I've built it, I've come across a bunch of cards that are so sweet in this deck. And if you just build it the right way with Changelings, then you actually can come across some of the most fun synergies that you'll ever have in any amount of EDH. Now, when it comes to Changeling Tribal, there are a couple of commanders that you can go with at this point. There are a couple of 5-color options, 4-color, 3-color, and so on. But I chose Reaper King just because it was one that interested me the most. It wasn't just something that was like win more. It was a commander that had a win condition attached to it if you decided to build around its interesting kind of edge. I came across a build of it a while ago and I decided to iterate on it. And in today's video, I wanted to show you my 10 favorite cards in this deck. Let me know down below if you want to see the full list and if you want to see potentially higher power version of it. I would love to kind of brew that up. I've never really attempted it because I felt like, again, it would go too far. But let's hop right into the first card, being the commander itself. It's card number 0, Reaper King. So it could be 10 mana, colorless for a legendary artifact Scarecrow, or it could just be one of each color or some combination of that. And other Scarecrow creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever another Scarecrow comes into play under your control, destroy target permanent. It's a 6/6. So we destroy target permanent. It doesn't have to be an artifact, creature, enchantment, whatever. It could be lands as well. And that's what I mentioned in the beginning. But the problem is, until recently, especially with Duskmourn providing us with more Scarecrows, there weren't too many Scarecrows out there in Commander. I mean, heck, if you do a quick Scryfall search of it, you'll only find 46. And to be fair, that is a large number when it comes to a 99 card deck, but you don't want to be playing all of these. They don't really have the best abilities. I mean, you can pay 5 mana for a 3/3 that says, yeah, you could sink a bunch of mana into it. And target white creature gains persist until end of turn. I mean, there are some of them that are really good, don't get me wrong, but some of them just don't really make a lot of sense. I mean, hey, shout out to my favorite Scarecrow, Painter's Servant, for all my legacy players out there. And Renmaw is a more recent kind of cool addition. Pilipala being part of combos out there. Scarecrow is actually kind of nice as well. There are some good options, but there aren't too many Scarecrows. So how do you build the Reaper King? Well, I think I can showcase that with my very first card. One of my favorite cards in the deck is Realmwalker. That's right, this is Changeling Typal here, with as many Changelings as you can fit in there with some payoffs. The deck is primarily made up of kind of like some cheap Changelings. Some of them have some abilities, Realmwalker being a more recent example of one that does have some abilities on it. Green 2 for a 2/3 creature shapeshifter. As Realmwalker enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. And so you can build your deck in such a way where maybe you have more of a certain type, more beasts, more elves, whatever. You can think about the payoffs later. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. And so this allows you to catch your Changelings off the top. You can take a look at the top. And so it just gives you a little bit of passive value. So you can then have those Changelings enter the battlefield when your Scarecrow is out, when your Reaper King is out, to then just start pinging off random problematic things. And so that's how I've decided to build this deck. And with a payoff like this, we can go into card number 2, which is going to be Frogtosser Banneret. It's black and 1 for a 1/1 creature goblin rogue with haste. Goblin creature spells and rogue spells you control cost 1 less to cast. And this is where we start getting real spicy with it, because now your Changelings are of any type. They will cost 1 less to cast. And so you have a couple of these effects in there. You have, whenever a beast card enters the battlefield, you draw a card. And whenever an elf, or you tap a number of elves, you can do an ability. And so this is where you start to kind of come together with some of these synergies that you can think of, the creatures that you want. You start thinking about creature tutors you want to put in, and your mind really starts going. There's so many ways that you can min-max builds of, obviously being a 5-color deck, but a Changeling type of deck. And so Frogtosser Banneret is my favorite card, number 2. Let's go into number 3 with Murmering Bosk. It's a land that's a forest, so you can tap it to add green, but as Murmering Bosk enters, you may reveal Tree Folk from your hand. Otherwise, Murmering Bosk enters tapped. And so that's great. You're gonna have Changelings in your hand. those will count as tree folk in your hand. That's the beauty of this card. This will almost always come in untap, and then you can tap, add white or black, and then have Murmering Bosk deal 1 damage to you. The reason I like this card is not only can you get that ability untap, there are other cards like Wanderwine Hub and stuff that you can bring it on tap by revealing a type. Murmering Bosk is searchable. It's a forest. So if you have some type of ramp-based card that can look at your deck for forest, that is a card. Or if you're playing fetch lands in there, you can look up Murmering Bosk and get it out. So that's why I really am a big fan of this. And also, it taps for 3 colors. That's great. In a deck that's 5 colors and constantly wants like chromatic lanterns and other effects like that out, just having a land that taps for 1 of 3 of the colors that you need is fantastic. And just can't stop shouting the praises of Murmering Bosk. Let's go to the next card here in Swarmyard. So a colorless land, Swarmyard, you can tap for colorless or tap it to regenerate target insect, rat, spider, or squirrel. Honestly, this is actually like a surprisingly expensive card too. I guess just it hasn't really been reprinted recently. I mean, Bloomburrow Commander, I guess, with some pretty sweet art. But before that, it was like Time Spiral remastered promos, then there was a secret lair drop, and then it was just in Time Spiral. Like this card was actually like really expensive for a minute. I managed to get like a pretty beaten up copy of this card, but it's one that can just protect your changelings. Think of some of the changelings that have a lot of value. There's like that Minotaur one that constantly keeps growing. Obviously, it's not going to be able to protect your commander, but it's going to be able to protect parts of your board. And so if you're looking for like a lower power version of this, you probably swap this out for maybe like some type of fixing land in a higher power version. But Swarmyard's pretty sweet in being able to protect your changeling decks. Honestly, I may not be teaching you how to build a Reaper King deck at all. I might just be teaching you how to build just a Morophon deck or whatever it might be. But changeling decks are a thing of beauty when it comes to Commander, especially based on how you build it. The next card is just a chef's kiss. When I get this out and I can untap with this card does so much. Risen Reef, when it enters, so blue, green, 1 for a 1/1 creature elemental. When Risen Reef or another elemental you control enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tap, so you get some ramp. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, so if it's not a land, you just put it in your hand. But the key part about this card is that it's not drawing a card. So if your opponent has a Narset out or an Orcish Bowmasters out, I mean, you're playing low power. If they have those out, they're mean people, but it just gets around that effect. If there are effects that are punishing you from drawing cards, Risen Reef doesn't do any of that. And it, of course, synergizes with your changelings because those are elementals as well. Risen Reef is just a great card. I have a lot of ephemerate effects in there as well, just flicker effects. So Risen Reef like benefits from that as well. It's not a cast, it's when it enters. So I can just flicker this if I don't have other targets for it. It's just a great card that ramps you out, gets you the lands that you need, and is just able to draw you the cards that you need, especially in the late game. You're drawing probably like 3, 4, 5 cards of this over the course of like an average game before someone's like, yeah, that thing needs to go. And honestly, that much value off of this creature is absolutely absurd. So next one is going to be Unified Will. Counter target spell if you control more creatures than that spell's controller. So this is definitely like a flex slot. On average, I'm thinking about the amount of creatures that my opponents have and the type of pot I'm in. Usually when I'm playing with my buddies, they are playing decks that, like, if they're playing creature decks, they like to go tall. I have a buddy of mine that has a dinosaur deck, so they like to go tall, and generally speaking, that's less creatures. I like to fill my board, get as many small stuff out there as possible, you know, to mess around with cards like the Risen Reef and the Frogtosser. And so I usually am a little bit wider, and I can use something like a Unified Will to almost just be a cheaper costed, a better costed counter spell in that way. Just being blue and 1 in a 5-color deck is just a lot easier to cast. It's definitely one to consider, but it's one that I would definitely replace maybe with like another card draw spell or something that cheats on more creatures. Just something that in a lower power deck, like I just like the fact that I can use this as like a random surprise counter spell that obviously is very interactable with, because if my opponent just destroys a bunch of my creatures or 1 or 2 of my creatures, they might be able to flip the tides here and then just be able to not have this Unified Will resolve the way I needed to. So that's something to think about. I like the fact that in those lower power tables, it introduces the idea of options for my opponent, because that's what it's really about. Like I find in lower power pods, a lot of times people are either purposefully there, in which case it's a good time, or not purposefully there. They're just not building well. And so people just lose the ability to like actually control games. Like giving people a little hand here and there. But Agadeem's Occultist is like a really cool like graveyard hate spell in my opinion. Black and 2 for a creature human shaman ally. It's a 0/2. You can tap it, put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control if its converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of allies you control. So especially in a big board, you can get out some, a decent amount of creatures from there. Like if you have like 2 to 3 changelings, that is cards with converted mana costs like 3, sometimes even 4. And then it's a great way to just get like random incidental things. I do have graveyard players in my pod. I have a mill player in my pod as well. And so sometimes I'm just going to be able to get some type of value out of Agadeem's Occultist. Obviously you want like haste enablers or something like this. You want that green enchantment that gives all creatures haste. You want potentially anger in your graveyard. You want ways to make sure that you can use this immediately, but definitely a flex card. Just one of those favorite cards that like works really well in my pod. In general, you probably want to replace this, but it's a fun little snipe piece for those changeling tribal decks. Now, Whelming Wave, chef's kiss, 10 out of 10 card. You're playing changeling tribal, you should not be missing this card. This is an auto include. Blue and 2 for a sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hand except for krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. That means all your changelings are gonna stay. They're all gonna stay. The beauty of it is if it's a graveyard based deck, it's all going back to their hand, so it doesn't even matter. They have to pick and choose. If they got too many cards in their hand, fine. They go to their turn, they discard them, but they gotta cast them all over again. Whelming Wave is a fantastic board wipe. A lot of times it ends up just being a Slyconic Rift. Obviously, if you have like a Reaper King out and stuff, that's not going to be the case, but you also do have cards in this deck that turn all your creatures into a certain type or create a large board of changelings. And so again, Whelming Wave does end up being a Cyclonic Rift sometimes. Obviously at sorcery speed, but a fantastic option regardless in decks like this. Someone let me know in the comment section down below. Are there more board wipes like this? I feel like I've been looking and I've been kind of missing out on some of them. There's like the black one where you choose a creature type and all other creature types get like -3/-3 or something like that. Like there's stuff like that. I find that to be a little like low impact, like -3/-3, whatever. But something like Whelming Wave is fantastic. Now we're getting into the range of, with these final 2 cards, we're getting into the range of like win conditions. And so these are generally my 2 favorite cards in this deck. Gilt-Leaf Archdruid, Changeling Tribal. Green 3 for a creature elf druid 3/3. Whenever you play a druid spell, you may draw a card. Great. So already when it's out on the battlefield, I'm getting more cards. Tap 7 untapped druids you control. Tap 7 untapped elves, or not elves, changelings that you control. You could tap druid as well. So it's kind of like tap 6 untapped druids you control. Gain control of all lands target players controls. Masterpiece. Just a masterpiece. I did not destroy your lands. I took them all. They're right here. I didn't destroy them. I had to tap 7 creatures to be able to get this effect to work. And you know what's great about this? It doesn't require you to tap this. You could do this multiple times. If you had a massive board of changeling tokens, you could do this to everybody. You could do this to multiple people. Gilt-Leaf Archdruid, just chef's kiss of a card when you're able to get this off. A beautiful win condition. Love it. Sometimes cards like this, like all you need are like 1, 2, 3 of them. You play some creature tutors, you build up to them. Gilt-Leaf Archdruid, just insane in something like Reaper King. If you're not able to, if you're not destroying their lands, you know you're building up to a Gilt-Leaf Archdruid. Destroy their creatures, take their lands. Beautiful. Chef's kiss again. Just a beautiful card. And really budget too. I mean, it's on the list, but like, hey, really budget card. Last card I want to talk about is a legitimate win condition. It literally says I win. Black 3, Liliana's Contract is an enchantment that says when Liliana Contract enters the battlefield, draw 4 cards and lose 4 life. Great. I like the fact that for 5 mana, I can draw 4 cards and lose 4 life. Honestly, that's not that bad. In a creature-based strategy, I don't mind it. Especially one that's of lower power. I'll take it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. That's it. Come on. 4 changelings, you win the game. Yes, you have to go through a whole turn cycle and all that stuff. We're in a lower power game. I get it. It's a low power deck. That's all it is. That's what your opponent's got to have it. Liliana's Contract puts them to the fire. And even if they answer your stuff, but it's not like you're going to lose the game. You drew 4 cards. You got a board. You got 4 cards. You lost 4 life, whatever. It doesn't matter. Liliana's Contract, Beautiful win condition. I love it. So, you know, I like this card more just because it literally just says win the game. And look, I'm a blue player at heart. I love me drawing cards, but Gilt-Leaf Archdruid arguably could be like kind of on the same plane of existence as this, but that's where I'm at. Those are my 10 favorite cards in my Reaper King deck. Let me know in the comment section down below if you would love to see the deck list, maybe a little bit of a deck tech going in right now as to how I built it. And let me know if you want to see an upgraded version of this. I've been kind of getting into a little bit of deck building when it comes to EDH recently. And I know we are a constructed focused channel here, but hey, I play a ton of formats. Just because the majority of them are constructed formats and one of them is EDH doesn't mean I can't farm the YouTube algorithm a little bit and get my EDH views. Okay, some of y'all be playing EDH as well. Regardless, Reaper King, a beautiful commander. Let me know what type of changeling commander you have. Is it Morophon? Is it something else? Are you playing 5-color, 4-color, 3-color? Are you playing one mono-color changelings? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you got down there. And till next time, hopefully you're slinging a really cool variety of spells in EDH, but also destroying your lands or your opponent's lands are perfectly fine with me. As long as you let me know, I'm cool with it. Rule 0 with me. I'll let you play Armageddon in my pod.